Okay, just dropped off my voting ballot, and it is time for day 2 of Cartalk. So today I just want to talk about mentor teaching, having a student teacher, should you do it, and sort of my approach on it. So I taught for 10 years, and actually 6 of those I had a student teacher. I worked a whole year with 9 student teachers. I had several years I doubled up. And then I had a 7th year, I guess you could say, where I worked with the pre-service student teacher doing their observations and presentations. So most of my teaching career has been actually with a student teacher in my classroom. I think that it is the greatest honor and privilege that you can have as a teacher, is to have a student teacher. And I think it's, when we think of impact, it's one of the most impactful things that I feel I had the chance to do as a teacher and educator in the classroom. I think a lot of times I thought about, go to administration, expand my impact, go to do something else, expand the impact that I make. And I feel like none of those were really anywhere close to having a student teacher. Because in essence, you have a whole year to work with, support, and mold a teacher whose impact is going to last in communities potentially for decades. And they themselves may take student teachers as well, and similarly so have that impact. And I feel like where a lot of the other roles of coaching and mentorship can be impactful, there's no greater impact than that of a mentor teacher on a student teacher that's there for an entire year to really work through the difficult stuff with them, to model for them what it's like to be a hardworking teacher. I feel like it's one of the most influential positions you can be in. I would say that a lot of teachers who say, I'm not ready for a student teacher, or it's going to be too much work, I think that I would just sort of reflect on, we got into teaching to make an impact, hopefully, I assume. And this is just as, if not more impactful than your actual students and what you do with them. So it's worth the extra time in terms of what you're able to offer for the generation of the future. It's worth the time in every way, shape, and form. And if you're being asked to do it, I'm sure you have something to offer. And I think that you will also grow through the experience. So that summarizes my answer in a nutshell. Now, in regards to what I see the role as, I sort of talked about you're in an influential role. What do you do with that influence? What's the most powerful things you can do? Well, for myself, I sort of did flip the script and did my own work with what I thought being a good mentor teacher was, and that was I spent my time and effort almost exclusively teaching them the things that I wish I knew. Now, I never had a mentor teacher, personally speaking. Sort of to teach for America, thrown into the classroom, figured a lot of things out for myself, trial by error. And I always told my student teachers, look, what I'm going to do for you is teach you all the things I wish somebody told me the first 3 years, the first 4 years, 5, 6, 7, 9, up until when I had that student teacher, that I wish I knew, that I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way. Whether that be peer interactions, whether that be how to opening a course, whether that be disgruntled students and what sets kids off, whether that be how to interact with parents, whether that be what to spend your time on, to be balanced, which, mind you, by the 4th year when I had my first student teacher, I didn't know what balance was, but by year 10, I had really good work-life balance, more or less, and was really able to key in to when I'm going to work extra and when the additional time is going to go in and where to really put my energy. So really teaching those things. So you're going to have those lessons. They're different for everyone. So that's the first thing that I would say that I would do. The second thing that I think is extremely important is that you create an environment that pushes them to failure. And this is what I believe academia is very unique and special about, especially in college and student teaching programs. It's failure without consequence. And I bring that up because I find that once you're teaching and you're being evaluated and someone's going to check some boxes that may affect your employment or your job or your progression or how you're viewed, you really want to do good on those evaluations, I feel. And as much as you can tell people, ignore them, don't worry about them, be creative, the reality of the fact is that they're going to go back and make sure that they do really good on those at whatever cost. And those become the most important thing when they come around, which is why I sometimes call the horse and pony show, because it's only when they come around. For new teachers, they're maybe under constant evaluation the first 2 years, which means that they have that pressure to conform to whatever the school really wants the first 2 years, or to look really good for the first 2 years. So they're going to do whatever's the most comfortable, which a lot of times is just going to be PowerPoint, lecture, worksheet, some discussions. Traditional teaching, more or less, which is okay. What we need to do is put them in those hard, uncomfortable settings that people don't try because they're hard. If you ask a teacher, why don't you do project-based learning? A lot of the times it's like, well, it's wild, it's out of control, and it's chaos. If you say, why are your tables all facing forward? Well, because classroom management becomes a lot harder. If you say, did you ever try doing an open inquiry lab? The answer is, yeah, and it was a mess, and kids were just all over the place, and it was just, it's difficult. And the reality is that for the open-ended projects, for the really high-quality group collaborative settings, when you start taking away the structures and having students take control of their learning, that stuff's really hard. And it's messy, and it looks really ugly. And the product is phenomenal, but it looks ugly. And if someone just walks in, it is 80-20, 80%, I would say 60-20-20. 60% looks good, 20% debatable, and then 20% is like off task, like redirection, like oof. And if you're not really on it and you know how to really manage that classroom and that chaos, it looks like 90% bad, 10% good, and 10% is the one group you're working with in that moment. So I feel like forcing student teachers to do the most difficult things, fail, and then you guide them through it, that hands down is the most valuable thing. Because what happens is that if they don't do it now, they either have to overcome their fear of judgment of peers, overcome their fear of evaluation scores, overcome all of these things that are so hard to overcome, to try something new just for it to crash and burn and maybe get some success out of it, and then struggle with it over years. Versus if you can give them that experience and let them feel the benefits of pushing through really open-ended, complex, student-driven tasks, whew, they're set up for life. And they'll become leaders. And I saw it, like, a lot of them became leaders instantly wherever they went. I think they were extraordinary from the start. I'm not going to take credit for that. But I think that giving them an environment where they get to explore, experiment, and suck for the first year while they're in a classroom a lot, that's really what I feel is where the money's at. So as a mentor teacher, just really thinking of the hardest things, not the easiest things, the hardest, most complex, most uncomfortable things, put them through it. Break down the process for them. Be there to coach them. Jump in when you need to. Support them through it until they can do it on their own by the end of the first year in your classroom, and they'll thrive. Okay, so that's like the calling. So those are like the two things. And then the third thing that I'll leave with, that I always I used to be like a scared straight as I got a student teacher, is that I used to say, hey, the first 6 weeks are the most important 6 weeks. What you do those 6 weeks will set the tone for the rest of your school year, and you should spend the most time before school starts preparing, so that as soon as that bell rings for day one, you have a plan and you go through it. Because the reality is that the students the first week of school are judging you, sniffing you, figuring out what you're about, and trying to establish who you are. So I would say that it's really important as a mentor teacher to take a step back and have them mimic. Period 1, go over the syllabus on your own. Period 2, they do it with you, bounce back and forth. Period 3, they're doing on their own, and you jump in where they make mistakes and you add them, fill in the gaps. That syllabus that you print out that says Mr. So-and-so's classroom has their name on it also. And even in that first period, they're going to introduce themselves as well. They're introduced not as a student teacher, but as a teacher. Leave that ambiguity for the students and just tell the students, listen, you got 2 teachers this year, not 1. Lucky you. And if the students ask, is this a student teacher? It's like, no, he's another teacher in the room right now with you. Put them at that level and then have them take ownership for setting the expectations and reinforce it, and really bring them into that culture building activity process, what you do to establish yourself. Have them do it with you, so that come next year when they have their classroom, they have a very vivid experience. And then after those first 6 weeks fall off, I say you can start chilling now, and you don't have to come every day. You don't have to speak every day, but those first 6 weeks are the most important. And even though their program may not have kicked off the most then, I would argue to say that I would tell them, like, I'd rather you here for 2 hours every day, or if you can be here every day all day, which some of my student teachers could, be here. It's going to be the most important thing to have a successful launch next year. Yeah. So long story short, do it. Go for it. It's a blessing. It's a lot of responsibility. I didn't even talk about your benefits. You're going to grow so much. You're going to get so much from them. Maybe I'll make a videos of just called what you can learn from your student teachers. That'll be my next Cartalk tomorrow. So without further ado, have a wonderful day, and Cartalk number 2 done.